My name is Noah Vance. I am 26 years old, and right now, I am standing outside my childhood home, watching a stranger change the locks while my own mother pretends. She doesn't recognize my face. It started exactly 4 hours ago. I was at my desk at the architectural firm when a notification pinged on my phone. A wire transfer. Not from a client, but from an escrow account tied to my grandfather's estate. Amount received, $1,200. My stomach dropped. The historic coastal estate left to me by my grandfather. Silas Vance was valued at over $4 million. It wasn't just land. It was a sanctuary he promised me before he passed. A place he built with his own hands. I sprinted to my car, dialing my parents over and over. Total silence. When I tore into the driveway of the estate, the moving trucks were already lined up. Heavy wooden crates were being hoisted into the backs of semis. Standing on the porch, holding a clipboard and looking entirely unbothered, was my mother, Eleanor, alongside my father, Arthur. Next to them stood a man in a sharp, tailored gray suit holding a sleek leather briefcase. "What is this?" I screamed, slamming my car door. "What are you doing to grandfather's house?" My mother didn't even flinch. She adjusted her designer sunglasses and looked at me with cold, calculated detachment. "Noah, go back to the city. This property has been legally liquidated. The new owner requires immediate possession." "Liquidated?" Grandfather left this to me. My voice cracked, the betrayal hitting me like a physical blow. "The deed is in my name." My father stepped forward. His expression hardened into a mask of corporate indifference. "The deed was in your name, Noah. But your grandfather signed a revocation clause 20 years ago. If the family corporation faced insolvency, control reverted to us. We sold it this morning to Vance Global Holdings. Your share of the remaining equity after debt clearance was wired to you. $1,200. For my entire life's anchor." "You're lying," I whispered, backing away as 2 security guards moved to flank the man in the gray suit. "He would never do that to me. He hated the corporation." The man in the gray suit smiled, a chilling, mechanical expression. He opened his briefcase, pulled out a certified document, and held it out. It was a perfectly executed, notarized amendment to my grandfather's will. The signature at the bottom was unmistakably Silas Vance's heavy, looping script. "It's entirely legal, Mr. Vance," the man said smoothly. "The house, the land, and everything currently inside it now belongs to my employer. You have 5 minutes to clear off the perimeter." My parents didn't look at me as they walked toward their Mercedes, leaving me with the guards. They didn't care about the history, the memories, or their own son. They had liquidated my future behind my back to save themselves. I stumbled back to my car, my chest suffocatingly tight. The world was spinning. But as my hand hit the steering wheel, my fingers brushed against the worn leather portfolio sitting in my passenger seat, the one item I had taken from my grandfather's private study the night he died. Inside, it was an old, yellowed piece of drafting paper, a blueprint of the estate's foundations that my grandfather had fiercely instructed me to keep safe, separate from any legal filing. "If they ever try to take it, Noah, look at the bedrock," he had whispered on his deathbed. With trembling hands, I pulled the blueprint out under the car's dome light. I unfolded the heavy paper, tracing the faded blue ink of the estate's floor plans. But as I flipped the page over, my heart stopped. Glued to the back of the heavy parchment was a hidden, official document stamped by the state Supreme Court, dated just 3 days before his death. It wasn't a blueprint. It was an absolute deed of trust that completely nullified the corporate revocation clause. I held the ultimate proof. The sale was completely illegal. They didn't own the house. I did. But as I looked up to confront them, a heavy thud shook my car. Through the windshield, I saw the man in the gray suit standing directly in front of my hood. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring directly at the paper in my hands, holding his phone to his ear, his calm demeanor replaced by an expression of pure, dangerous panic. Before I could turn the key, the passenger side window shattered inward. Glass showered the passenger seat, glittering like ice under the dome light. A heavy gloved hand shoved through the broken window, clawing wildly for the leather portfolio. "Get the paper!" The man in the gray suit barked into his phone. Adrenaline surged. I slammed the gear shift into reverse and stomped on the gas. The tires screeched, tearing backward down the gravel driveway. The gloved hand was ripped out of the cabin, leaving streaks of blood on the jagged glass remaining in the frame. Through the cracked windshield, I saw 2 security guards sprinting toward a black SUV parked by the gates. I spun the wheel, threw the car into drive, and tore out onto the winding coastal highway, my heart hammering against my ribs. My hands shook violently against the steering wheel as I glanced down at the passenger seat. The yellowed blueprint was covered in shattered safety glass, but it was intact. The Supreme Court stamp gleamed under the passing streetlights. My parents hadn't just made a desperate business move. They had committed federal fraud, and whoever bought the property knew it. I checked my rearview mirror. Headlights slammed into view. The black SUV was gaining fast, its high beams blinding me. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. It was my mother. I hit speakerphone. "Noah, pull over right now," her voice came through, devoid of any maternal warmth, laced only with sharp, icy panic. "You don't know what you're holding. You're going to ruin everything. You lied to me," I shouted over the rushing wind howling through the broken window. "Grandfather nullified the clause. The sale is a fraud, and you know it." "Noah, listen to me very carefully," she hissed. "The people we sold that land to are not investors. If you don't hand over that document, they will destroy us. They will destroy you. Stop the car." "No," I said, my voice hardening with a resolve I didn't know I possessed. "I'm going to the police." "The police can't help you with what's under that house," she said. Before I could ask what she meant, the line went dead. Suddenly, a massive impact shuddered through my rear bumper. The SUV had rammed me. The steering wheel jerked violently, nearly pulling the car off the cliffside road toward the dark ocean churning, hundreds of feet below. I gripped the wheel, pushing the engine to its absolute limit. Ahead, the highway split, one road leading toward the bright, safe lights of the city police precinct, the other plunging into the dense, unlit state forest. The SUV rammed me again, harder this time. My rear tire blew out with a deafening pop. The car began to fishtail wildly out of control. I couldn't make it to the city. Steering into the skid, I yanked the wheel to the right, turning blindly into the dark canopy of the forest road. The SUV blew past the turnoff, its brakes screeching as it realized it had lost me. I drove on the rim for another half-mile, the grinding of metal against asphalt echoing in the quiet woods, until the engine finally sputtered and died. I grabbed the leather portfolio, shoved the sacred document inside my jacket, and killed the headlights. Silence descended on the woods, broken only by the ticking of my cooling engine. I stepped out of the car, my boots crunching on the damp leaves. I needed to move, to find a place to hide until morning. But as I turned a corner on the dark trail, I stopped dead in my tracks. Tucked deep into the trees, hidden beneath a camouflage tarp, was a vehicle. A vintage olive-drab military Humvee. I approached it cautiously, pulling back the heavy canvas. On the driver's side door was a faded emblem, a crest belonging to a highly classified tactical unit my grandfather had served in during the Cold War, a unit that officially never existed. The driver's side door was unlocked. Hanging from the rearview mirror was a rusted set of keys with a brass tag stamped with a single word, Noah. My grandfather knew this day would come. He had left this here for me. But as I reached for the keys, a low, electronic chime echoed from the Humvee's dashboard. A small, modified military satellite screen flickered to life in the darkness, glowing a stark, eerie green. A text message appeared on the screen. Sent to this encrypted receiver just 60 seconds ago. "Noah, your parents don't know the truth. The house wasn't sold for money. Look at the coordinates on page 2 of the blueprint. They are digging tonight. You have less than 3 hours before they find the vault." The message was signed with an old military call sign I hadn't heard since I was a child. It was from my grandfather, the grandfather who died 6 months ago. My breath hitched. The glowing green text reflected off the glass of the tactical screen, illuminating the inside of the dusty cabin. Silas Vance was dead. I had attended his funeral. I had watched them lower his casket into the earth. I scrambled to pull the blueprint from my jacket, tearing it open across the Humvee's rugged dashboard. I flipped to page 2, a structural layout of the estate's subterranean foundation. My eyes tracked down to the bottom right corner, beneath the standard architectural legends, lightly etched into the paper with a silver ink pen that only caught the light. At a precise angle was a string of military grid coordinates, and right beneath them, a handwritten note. "The vault does not hold gold, Noah. It holds their sins." Before I could process the words, a blinding flash of white light illuminated the dense forest behind me. High beams. The black SUV had found the turnoff. I slammed the keys into the Humvee's ignition and turned it. The heavy diesel engine roared to life with a ferocious, earth-shaking rumble. I threw the massive vehicle into gear and slammed the accelerator. Just as the SUV tore around the bend, its front bumper clipping the back of my abandoned sedan, the Humvee plowed through the thick underbrush, its heavy off-road tires shredding branches and flattening saplings as I bypassed. the main trail entirely. Through the rearview mirror, I saw the SUV attempt to follow, but its low chassis instantly caught on a fallen log, metal grinding against wood as it stuck fast. I was free, for now. I followed the green line on the Humvee's tactical GPS, navigating through the pitch-black mountain passes back toward the coastline. The coordinates didn't lead to the main house. They led to the sheer cliffs directly, underneath it, an area accessible only by an old smuggling cave that had been sealed off since the 1920s. 40 minutes later, I killed the engine and rolled to a stop, inside a hidden alcove of jagged rock just above the crashing surf. The salt air stung my face as I stepped out, clutching the blueprint. Above me, perched precariously on the cliff edge like a monolith, sat my grandfather's estate. Floodlights were everywhere. Industrial generators hummed in the distance, and I could see the silhouettes of heavy excavators parked on the pristine lawn, their mechanical arms tearing into the earth near the east wing. They are digging tonight. I navigated the wet, treacherous rocks toward the cave entrance, using the flashlight found in the Humvee's glove box. The entrance was blocked by a massive reinforced steel door, rusted heavily by decades of ocean spray. It looked completely impenetrable. There was no keyhole, no keypad, just a solid sheet of iron. My heart sank. I brought the flashlight close to the door, searching for any sign of how to pass. Near the center, etched into the rust, was a small, circular indentation exactly the size of a standard military challenge coin. My hand instinctively flew to my neck. I pulled at the heavy silver chain I had worn every day since my grandfather's passing. Hanging from it wasn't a cross, but his old silver unit medallion. I pressed the medallion into the indentation. A heavy mechanical click echoed through the cavern. With a deep, grinding groan, the massive steel door slowly swung inward, revealing a pitch-black tunnel that smelled faintly of ozone and old paper. I stepped inside, the flashlight beam cutting through the damp darkness. The tunnel sloped sharply upward, leading directly beneath the house. After 5 minutes of climbing, the stone walls gave way to reinforced concrete. I reached a heavy steel grate. Looking through it, I realized I was standing directly beneath the basement floor of the estate. But I wasn't alone. Voices echoed through the grate. I killed my flashlight and crouched low. Directly above me stood my father, Arthur, his hands trembling as he poured himself a drink from a crystal decanter. Standing across from him was the man in the gray suit, along with 2 heavily armed men in tactical gear. "We're running out of time." "Arthur," the man in the gray suit said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, low hiss. "The excavators will hit the primary seal in 20 minutes. If your son shows up with that absolute deed, the state authorities will halt the dig within the hour. Do you have any idea what happens if the Federal Oversight Committee gets their hands on those records?" "Noah doesn't know anything," my father stammered, his voice laced with terror. "He thinks it's just a land dispute. He thinks he's protecting his inheritance. He has the last paper," the gray-suited man replied coldly, drawing a suppressed firearm from beneath his jacket. "The paper that proves your father didn't own this land when he signed the corporate treaty. The paper that proves you sold us a lie. If Noah opens that vault, he doesn't just get the house. He uncovers the truth about who actually died in this house 20 years ago." My breath caught in my throat. 20 years ago? That was the year my older brother Leo supposedly drowned in the ocean. Suddenly my father's phone rang, shattering the tense silence of the basement. He answered it on speaker, his hands shaking. "Sir," a voice came through the line, crackling with static. "We lost the boy in the Ridgewoods, but we found something else. We pulled the black box data from Silas Vance's old terminal. The signal isn't automated." The man in the gray suit leaned in. "What do you mean?" "The encrypted messages being sent to the Humvee? They aren't delayed pings, sir. They are being typed in real time. The IP address is routing from inside the vault right now." The air in the concrete tunnel turned instantly ice cold. My father dropped his glass. It shattered against the stone floor, amber liquid splashing across his leather shoes. "Impossible," Arthur whispered, his face draining of all color. "My father has been in the ground for 6 months. I saw the body. I signed the death certificate." "Then someone else is down there," the man in the gray suit barked, slamming his briefcase shut. "Or your father faked his death to protect what's behind that seal." "Move! I want the breach team at the secondary door now." Above me, the heavy thud of combat boots echoed as the men scrambled out of the basement, their voices fading into the upper floors of the estate. I waited 10 agonizing seconds, my heart hammering against my ribs, before pushing against the iron grate. It swung upward with a sharp metallic screech. I scrambled out into the dimly lit basement, the smell of dust and spilled whiskey filling my nose. The house shook. A low, vibrating rumble groaned through the foundations. The heavy excavators on the lawn were digging deeper, tearing toward the very concrete I was standing on. I looked down at the blueprint, my fingers tracing the silver ink lines. The coordinates didn't stop at the basement. There was a hidden seam mapped behind the massive brick wine cellar at the far end of the room. I ran over, tearing bottles of vintage wine from the racks, smashing them onto the floor until the brick wall was bare. I searched wildly for a latch, a switch, anything. Nothing. Look at the bedrock, Noah. My grandfather's deathbed words echoed in my mind. I dropped to my knees. At the very base of the brick wall, where the masonry met the jagged, natural granite of the cliffside, there was a single deep scratch mark in the stone. I jammed my fingers into the crevice and pulled. A heavy iron lever, hidden beneath a false stone flap, shifted. With a grinding groan of gears, the entire wine rack pivoted backward, revealing a narrow, spiraling staircase carved directly into the wet bedrock of the cliff. A blast of stale, warm air hit my face, carrying a sound that made my spine tingle. It was the rhythmic, electronic tap of a high-frequency keyboard. Tap, tap, tap. Someone was down there. Right now. I crept down the wet stairs, descending deeper into the throat of the cliff. The sounds of the heavy machinery above faded, replaced by the deep, booming roar of the ocean crashing against the outer cave walls. At the bottom of the stairs, the tunnel opened into a massive, high-tech bunker. Computer monitors from the late 90s lined the walls, their green screens flickering with data streams, military logs, and live satellite feeds of the estate's perimeter. In the center of the room sat a massive, reinforced steel vault door, its digital keypad glowing a stark modern blue. And sitting at the main terminal, his back to me, was a man draped in a dark tactical jacket. His fingers were flying across a mechanical keyboard, sending an encrypted data stream. "Grandfather?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The typing stopped. The figure froze, his shoulders tensing. Slowly, the chair spun around. The man sitting in the chair was not an 80-year-old man. He was young. He had a jagged scar cutting across his left cheek, and eyes that perfectly mirrored my own in the green glow of the monitors. My breath caught in my throat. I knew that face from a dozen old family photographs. "Leo?" I choked out. You died 20 years ago. You drowned." My older brother looked at me, a mixture of profound sorrow and fierce determination in his eyes. He stood up, stepping away from the terminal. "They needed me to die." "Noah," Leo said, his voice deep and raspy, "because 20 years ago, I found out what our parents were actually selling to Vance Global. It wasn't land. It was a list. A list? A deep cover operative registry from grandfather's old unit," Leo said, walking toward the massive vault door. "Our parents found it in his files. They tried to sell it to foreign buyers to cover their corporate debts. Grandfather faked my death to hide me from them, and we've been running this counter-operation from the shadows ever since. But grandfather didn't fake his death. Noah. He really died 6 months ago." "Then who is typing the messages?" I asked, my mind spinning out of control. Leo pointed to the main terminal screen. A live countdown timer was ticking away. "So they requires many do. Grandfather left an automated protocol," Leo said, "but I'm the one executing it. The paper you have, the absolute deed, isn't just a property title. Noah, look at the watermark under a blue light." I pulled the document from my jacket. Leo grabbed a tactical UV flashlight from the desk and shined it across the Supreme Court stamp. The yellowed paper instantly transformed. Hidden within the fiber of the paper was a glowing string of alphanumeric ciphers, the master decryption keys to the entire federal registry. Suddenly, a deafening explosion rocked the bunker. The ceiling cracked, showering us in concrete dust. The monitors flickered violently, and a red warning light began to flash on the vault door. Through the security monitors, I saw the basement wall above us collapse. The man in the gray suit, flanked by 4 armed operatives, stood at the top of the secret staircase, their weapons drawn. "They're through," Leo said, his face hardening as he drew a tactical knife from his belt. "They're coming for the keys. Noah, input the cipher into the vault keypad right now, or they kill us both." But as I leaped toward the keypad, the main computer screen flashed a new, terrifying alert. "Warning. Intruder access detected in Vault Core." Separation sequence initiated. Someone was already inside the vault. The red alarm lights bathed the bunker in a bloody glow. Upstairs, the rapid, synchronized thud of tactical boots was getting louder, cascading down the stone staircase. "Noah, the code." "Now!" Leo yelled, throwing himself against a steel support beam near the base of the stairs, his knife catching the flashing red light. My hands flew over the glowing blue keypad. I stared at the hidden, alphanumeric cipher shimmering under the UV light on the back of the blueprint. 7V9 Alpha 92. I punched the keys in, my fingers slick with cold sweat. The vault door groaned. A heavy, pneumatic hiss echoed through the cavern as the massive steel bolts retracted. The 3-ton door slowly swung outward, revealing a sleek, metallic room illuminated by sterile white LED floor panels. It looked like a modern server room, completely disconnected from the decaying cliffside around it. But the primary server rack in the center of the room was pulled completely open, its internal drives exposed. Standing in front of it, holding a portable data extractor plugged directly into the core, was my mother. Eleanor Vance turned around, her face pale but her eyes blazing with an icy, desperate fury. In her right hand, she held a compact silver pistol pointed directly at my chest. "Stop right there, Noah," she said, her voice echoing sharply over the blaring siren. I froze at the threshold of the vault. "Mother, you're the one inside? Did you really think your father had the stomach for this?" She scoffed, a bitter, mocking laugh escaping her lips. "Arthur is a coward. He thinks we sold this place to save the family company from bankruptcy. He has no idea how deep this goes. I built Vance Global Holdings. I brought the investors in." "You're selling out grandfather's country," I whispered, the depth of her betrayal cutting through me. "You're selling the identities of people who trusted him. People who are still alive. I am securing our survival," she snapped, gesturing with the gun toward the blinking data extractor. "Your grandfather was a relic who spent his life hoarding secrets, while we struggled to maintain the family legacy. This list is worth $80 million on the private market. Noah, with that money we are untouchable." From behind me, a brutal crash echoed from the stairs. The man in the gray suit and his operatives had breached the lower bunker. "Eleanor!" the gray-suited man shouted, stepping into the room, his weapon raised. "Is the extraction complete?" 2 minutes, Vance," she replied, not breaking eye contact with me. "Keep them contained." I looked from my mother to the man in the gray suit. "Vance. His name is Vance?" I looked back at Leo, who was pinned behind a stone pillar just outside the vault door, holding off 2 operatives. A blinding blue arc of electricity erupted from the server rack. Sparks rained down like a firework explosion, hissing against the sterile white floor panels. The data extractor in my mother's hand violently short-circuited, smoke billowing from its plastic casing as the screen went completely black. The data transfer didn't just halt, it fried. "No!" my mother screamed, dropping the scorching device as it burned her hand. She stared at the ruined drive, her face twisted in pure rage. "You stupid boy! You've destroyed it." I ended it, I panted, backing away toward the vault door as the entire facility began to lose power. The blinding white LEDs flickered out, plunging the vault into the eerie, pulsing emergency red light once again. "You didn't end anything," my uncle roared, stepping out from behind the server rack, his face contorted in shadow. "That paper was the only thing keeping you alive, Noah." He raised his weapon, aiming directly at my forehead. Before he could pull the trigger, Leo lunged through the vault door, tackling my uncle to the ground. The gun fired blindly into the ceiling, bringing down a shower of plaster and metal wiring. The 2 men wrestled fiercely on the floor, a brutal display of desperate combat. "Noah, run!" Leo shouted, jamming his elbow into our uncle's jaw. "Get out of the bunker!" I looked back at my mother. She wasn't looking at me anymore. She was frantically scraping at the floor, trying to salvage the scorched data extractor, completely consumed by her greed. I turned and bolted out of the vault, sprinting across the main bunker floor, but the 2 remaining tactical operatives blocked the secret stone staircase leading back up to the house. I had only one choice. I sprinted toward the narrow concrete tunnel that led down to the sea cave, the path I had used to enter. Behind me I heard the heavy, lumbering footsteps of my uncle pursuing me into the dark, damp tunnel. "You can't outrun this, Noah." His voice echoed off the wet stone walls. "The entire perimeter is surrounded by my men. There is no escape." I ignored him, my boots slamming against the concrete incline as I barreled downward. The smell of salt air grew stronger, and the booming roar of the ocean filled the tunnel, drowning out the alarms. Burst through the rusted iron door, back into the massive smuggling cave. The tide had come in. The jagged rocks, I had climbed over earlier were now entirely submerged under 5 feet of churning. Violent black water. The olive-drab military Humvee was still parked. In the high alcove, safely above the waterline, I scrambled up the wet rocks, threw myself into the driver's seat, and slammed the heavy door shut. I cranked the keys. The massive diesel engine roared to life, its headlights cutting through the misty darkness of the cave, reflecting off the rising tide. Suddenly, a heavy weight slammed onto the hood of the Humvee. Through the windshield, my uncle glared at me, his face bleeding from his fight with Leo. He raised his suppressed firearm, pointing it directly through the glass at my chest. "Turn it off." "Noah," he commanded, his voice barely audible over the roaring engine and crashing waves. "Or I paint this windshield with your blood." But I wasn't looking at his gun. I was looking at the dashboard. The military tactical screen hadn't shut down. It was flashing a new localized radar alert. A massive, high-speed naval vessel was approaching the cliffside coordinates at top speed, arriving from the open ocean. A new message blinked across the screen, overriding all systems. "Execution completed. Federal Internal Affairs arrived. Bail out now." I didn't turn off the engine. I rammed the gear shift into drive, spun the steering wheel completely to the right, and floored the accelerator. Instead of driving out the narrow cave exit, I drove the 3-ton military vehicle straight off the jagged rock ledge, plunging us directly into the dark, raging depths of the ocean. The impact was deafening. A wall of freezing black water slammed into the windshield as the 3-ton Humvee plunged into the ocean. The headlights pierced the underwater gloom, illuminating swirling sand and chaotic bubbles. On the hood, my uncle was instantly torn away by the violent current, his weapon slipping from his grip as he floated into the dark void of the sea. Inside the cabin, water began rushing in through the floorboards, rising rapidly around my boots. The heavy diesel engine sputtered, groaned, and then died, plunging the vehicle into pitch-black darkness. The pressure of the ocean locked the doors tight. I was trapped in a sinking metal tomb. If you ever find yourself underwater, Noah, don't fight the ocean. Use the pressure. My grandfather's old survival training echoed in my head. I forced myself to breathe slowly, conserving oxygen as the water rose past my waist, then my chest. I waited. The cabin filled completely, the freezing water submerging my face. With the internal and external pressure equalized, I slammed my shoulder against the heavy driver's door. It swung open into the abyss. I kicked off from the steering wheel, swimming upward toward the churning surface. My lungs burned, begging for air. Just as my vision began to vignette into darkness, my head broke the surface. I gasped, drawing in deep breaths of cold salt air. Blinding searchlights suddenly cut through the night sky from the open ocean. A massive, sleek black naval vessel roared around the jagged cliffside, its tactical hull slicing through the waves. High-powered strobe lights illuminated the entire cliff face, blinding the security forces stationed on the estate's lawns above. "Federal agents, drop your weapons and stay on the ground." A voice boomed from a megaphone on the ship's deck. A team of combat divers emerged from the water near me, dragging a gasping, defeated figure with them, my uncle. They hauled him aboard a rigid-hulled inflatable boat. I swam toward the rocky shoreline of the cove, my muscles cramping from the cold. I dragged myself onto the wet stone, shivering violently. As I looked up at the estate, the floodlights on the lawn were being systematically cut. Sirens wailed in the distance as state and federal authorities converged on the property. From the main highway, the perimeter was secure. The operation was over, but as I stood up, wiping the salt water from my eyes, my phone, waterproofed in my tactical jacket pocket, vibrated fiercely. It shouldn't have had a signal down here. I pulled it out. The screen displayed a single, live video feed from an unlisted security camera inside the estate's private study. The camera was trained on my grandfather's old mahogany desk. Sitting in the leather high-back chair, completely unbothered by the flashing blue police lights reflecting through the window, was my father, Arthur. He wasn't crying. He wasn't panicking. He was holding a glass of scotch, staring directly into the lens of the camera as if he knew I was watching. He leaned forward, his voice cutting through the phone's speaker with a chilling, calm clarity that I had never heard from him before. "You played your part perfectly. Noah, you destroyed the server core, just like your grandfather programmed you to do." My blood ran colder than the ocean water. "Did you really think your mother and uncle were the masterminds?" Arthur smiled, a slow, terrifying expression. "They were the bait. The government needed to see them fail so they would look away from the real vault, the one under the floorboards of this room, And right now, I have your brother. The camera panned down. Leo was strapped to a heavy iron chair in the corner of the study, unconscious, a visual monitoring device taped to his chest. My teeth chattered, but not from the freezing ocean water. My entire life had been a carefully choreographed lie. The weak, bumbling father, I knew was a phantom, a mask worn by a man who had just outmaneuvered the federal government, his own wife and his own brother. Why? I choked out, staring at the small, glowing screen in my palm. Leo is your son. I'm your son, and you have both served the family legacy beautifully, Arthur replied smoothly, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Your grandfather built a system of absolute control, Noah, but he grew soft. He wanted to bury the truth. I wanted to leverage it, by letting your mother and uncle play the villains. The federal task force thinks they've captured the network's head. They will package up their evidence, seal the case, and leave this property forever, leaving me entirely in the clear. The server core is fried, I spat, wiping blood and salt water from my cheek as I began climbing the steep, hidden cliffside path back up toward the estate. The registry is gone. You have nothing to sell. Arthur let out a low, amused chuckle. Noah, the server core in the bunker was a decoy loop. Your grandfather's true, unredacted list wasn't stored on a hard drive. He was an old-school operative. He knew digital assets could be hacked, wiped, or fried. He leaned closer to the camera, his eyes locking onto mine through the lens. The real list is a physical ledger, and it was built into the very lining of the leather portfolio you took from his study the night he died. The portfolio you're still carrying. My heart stopped. I froze on the rocky path. I reached down to my side. The waterproof tactical jacket had kept it secured against my ribs. I pulled out the worn leather portfolio. I had assumed it was just a container for the blueprint. I opened it, tearing at the heavy inner leather lining. My fingers hit something stiff. I ripped the stitched leather apart. Hidden inside the spine of the portfolio was a micro-thin, waterproof fabric ribbon, densely coated with thousands of lines of microscopic, high-density print. The names, dates, and bank accounts of every deep-cover asset in the Western Hemisphere. Bring it to the study, Noah, Arthur said, his voice dropping its warmth, replacing it with a razor-sharp command. If you try to alert the federal agents on the lawn, the monitoring device on Leo's chest will trigger a lethal dose of localized neurotoxin into his bloodstream. You have exactly 7 minutes before his heart stops. The screen split. A digital countdown timer appeared over Leo's unconscious form, Zo659. I didn't think. I jammed the ribbon into my pocket, threw the ruined portfolio into the ocean below, and sprinted up the final ridge of the cliff face, slipping into the shadows of the estate's sprawling backyard. The lawn was a chaotic mess of flashing blue lights, federal vehicles, and shouting agents arresting my mother and my uncle's tactical team. I bypassed them completely, using my knowledge of the architectural layouts to slip through a broken cellar window. I moved like a ghost through the servant hallways, my boots squeaking softly against the hardwood, until I reached the heavy oak doors of my grandfather's private study. I pushed the doors open. The room was dimly lit by a single desk lamp. My father sat exactly as he had on the video feed. In the corner, Leo hung limply in the iron chair, the small electronic patch blinking menacingly on his chest. 2:14. Ah, the return of the prodigal son, Arthur said, rising from his chair and extending his hand. The fabric ribbon, Noah. Give it to me, and I disarm the patch. I looked at my brother, then at the man who shared my DNA. You won't let us leave, I said softly, my hand resting in my jacket pocket. If we walk out of here, we're a liability. You're going to kill us both anyway. Family is a business. Noah, Arthur sighed, drawing a small, matte black pistol from his waistband. And business requires executive decisions. But I'd rather not watch you both die. Give me the ribbon, and I'll make Leo's passing painless. Keep it, and I take it from your corpse. He aimed the gun directly between my eyes. The countdown on Leo's chest hit 01 wow. I pulled my hand out of my pocket. I wasn't holding the fabric ribbon. I was holding the silver unit medallion. I had pulled from the cave door, the one that belonged to my grandfather. You forgot one thing about grandfather's old unit, Dad, I whispered. Arthur frowned, his finger tightening on the trigger. What? They never built a lock without a master override. I slammed the silver medallion directly onto the digital control hub, sitting on the corner of my grandfather's mahogany desk, the exact hub that routed the secure video feed. The moment the silver medallion struck the copper contacts of the desk hub, a sharp, high-pitched frequency. Tone pierced the quiet. Room. The digital countdown timer on. Leo's chest abruptly froze at Z or 19, the flashing red indicator light on the patch turned a solid, inert blue. The override didn't just pause the system, it completely severed the connection between the desk, hub, and the bio patch. My father's eyes widened in sheer disbelief. He jerked his gaze from Leo to the desk, his knuckles turning white as he gripped his pistol. "What did you do?" "Grandfather didn't trust you, Arthur," I said, my voice steady as I stepped forward. "He never did. He built this desk. He built this security network. And he gave me the key when I was a child. You were playing his game the entire time." With a roar of frustration, Arthur raised the gun to shoot me. But the frequency tone wasn't just a command to disarm the patch. It was a broadcast signal. Before Arthur could pull the trigger, the heavy mahogany doors of the study exploded inward. A flashbang grenade detonated in the center of the room, filling the space with a blinding white light and a deafening, concussive boom. The force of the blast threw me backward onto the Persian rug. Arthur stumbled, coughing blindly as smoke filled the air. Through the haze, 4 federal agents in heavy tactical gear swarmed into the room, their weapon-mounted lights cutting through the smoke like laser beams. "Federal agents! Drop the weapon! Get on the ground now!" Arthur, completely disoriented and consumed by sudden panic, spun around with his gun raised toward the door. Pop, pop! 2 suppressed rounds struck Arthur cleanly in the right shoulder and thigh. He collapsed to the floor with a sharp cry, his pistol clattering away across the hardwood. Within seconds, agents pinned him down, slamming heavy zip ties around his wrists. I dragged myself up from the floor, coughing through the smoke, and scrambled over to Leo. I ripped the inert bio patch off his chest and slapped his face gently. "Leo, wake up, Leo!" My brother groaned, his eyes fluttering open as he took a ragged breath. He looked around the chaotic, smoky room, his gaze landing on our father being dragged away in handcuffs. A faint, weary smile touched Leo's lips. You actually did it, little bro." "We did it," I whispered, helping him loosen the straps anchoring him to the chair. An older man in a crisp, federal windbreaker stepped through the debris of the doorway, holding a secure evidence bag. He looked down at Arthur, then turned his sharp, calculating eyes to me. "Mr. Vance," the agent said, his voice flat and authoritative. "I'm Director Vance. No relation. Your grandfather was a highly respected asset to this agency. We've recovered the primary suspects, but our intelligence indicates the master file is still missing from the server core below. Do you know where it is?" I looked at the agent. Then I looked at Leo, who gave me a microscopic nod. I reached into my pocket, my fingers brushing against the micro-thin fabric ribbon containing the names of thousands of innocent, deep-cover operatives. If I gave it to the agency, they would use it. The cycle of secrets, leverage, and blood money would just continue under a different corporate header. Kept my hand in my pocket, pulling out nothing but the torn, blank blueprint of the estate's foundations. The server core short-circuited when my mother tried to force the extraction. "Director," I lied smoothly, handing him the useless paper. "The data was entirely wiped. There's nothing left but the house." The director stared at me for a long, agonizing moment, trying to read my expression. Finally, he exhaled, taking the blueprint. "A damn shame, but justice has been served. This property is officially yours again. Mr. Vance, clear out your personal items by morning. The federal seal will be placed on the gates." 2 hours later, the estate was silent. The blue lights were gone. The trucks had rolled away. Leo and I stood alone on the cliffside deck, watching the first rays of dawn bleed gold over the dark Atlantic Ocean. The wind was crisp, clearing away the lingering smell of ozone and smoke. I pulled the fabric ribbon from my pocket. I struck a match from my grandfather's desk, holding the flame to the edge of the material. It caught instantly, melting into harmless black ash that the ocean breeze scattered into the abyss below. "What do we do now?" Leo asked, looking out over the water. I looked back at the massive, empty house behind us, the inheritance my parents had tried to destroy, the place built on a foundation of secrets. "We rebuild," I said softly. "But this time we build something honest.